there's not much introduction for me to do with this group because well, they've already heard from me earlier this afternoon, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce David Lancefield. For those of you who have not met David, he has decades-long experience working on some of the largest strategy projects in Europe and around the world. A lot of also author experience with articles and books, with Strategy and Harvard Business Review, Financial Times, and he is also a guest lecturer and alumni at London Business School. So it is wonderful that David's taking time out of his agenda to join us here today. Welcome live from London, David Lancefield.
Got live from London, there you go. And it's vaguely sunny, so I'm very grateful. Thank you. We're on the clock, so we're going to have some fun this afternoon. When I use the term transformational leadership, how do you feel? Yeah, intimidated, inspired, a bit cynical? Get on the chat. Is that possible, Alina? Get on the chat and just actually write down the word. Just be unvarnished, honest. What's the word that comes to mind when you hear the word transformational leadership?
Chat is open. Yeah.
Engaged and inspired. Thank you, Miko. Hesitation. Very good. Keep going. I want to hear everyone. Ambitious. Bluff. Challenge the status quo. Well, we're going to keep adaptive, huge challenge, superpower. I think it's one of those topics that evokes different emotions. This is, if you're genuinely going to live up to the term, it is incredibly difficult, hard, personally and professionally, which I want to come on to today. A lot of people promise it. Very few actually live up to it. I mean, it's not surprising because it's a very big ask. You know, successful business transformations are very rare. And look at all the stats, but they're actually more necessary. If you look at what's happened in the pandemic, many companies face hard strategic questions at the moment. Platforms around them have become stronger. Some of their competitors have weakened, some have strengthened, and they're facing difficult, economic conditions in many markets. And actually, their investors are facing, are actually expecting bounce backs in terms of returns, and their employees, I would argue, in many cases, not just because of the hybrid environment, are more demanding in terms of the purpose and the position of work in their lives. So transformation, which I define as a substantive, irreversible shift in an organization's identity, value system, and capabilities, requires three really difficult acts. The first is to develop that deeper sense of purpose that frames the choices strategically in the culture. Secondly, it requires repositioning the core business. And thirdly, it requires creating new sources of growth. And you have to do all of that at the same time over many years. Now, who is a transformational leader? Well, we often think of CEOs. Here's the second interaction. You're not allowed to mention Bezos, Elon Musk, Satya Nadella, or anybody else. But I would love to hear, also some women, by the way, would be amazing. I'd love to hear your ideas and your names of genuinely transformational leaders. And depending on time, I might ask you as to how you've come up with it. So you're not allowed to mention those names. They may or may not be transformational, by the way. But who would you actually list when you think of a transformational leader? Maybe the CEO. They're often somebody influential in the organization that's not the CEO, maybe chief strategy officer, a particular person with an MD in the role, HR director. But it's hard to think of a transformational leader that doesn't shape not only the organization, but also the ecosystem and the system around them. So what do we got? Hubert Joly, yes? Donald Trump. I did not expect that answer. I tell you, I expect many answers. Is that James who put that? Eckhart Vincent, is that how I said it? James, give me a one-liner as to why.
Well, that's why I say in the worst possible way. He certainly has transformed the entire political landscape, probably not for the better, but the impact is going to be there for generations. Environmentally, as far as the politics of the US is concerned, global politics. Yep. He has truly transformed the ecosystem, not in the way that I would have liked it to be, but there has been a massive transformation.
Hopefully it's reversible though, but yeah, great comment. Who is Heath Valley Network? That's a corporate run. Sorry. Victor, sorry, yes, Victor. Give me one liner, please, not five. One liner given time.
Eckhart Winston is the old CEO of the former Origin.
company. And
Right.
he was truly transformational in the fact that he built out certain cells and then took new cells to a different area once it was grown into 30. And people still talk about him as truly transformational leader in building that company in itself.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, let me tell you a short story. And Eileen, this is a different one to the one we heard before. If Eileen's still on the line, this is a transformation I co-led as a consultant with the corporate. I won't say the company name just to be sensitive to them, but you know, I'm going to talk about a board meeting. The stakes were very high. The decisions taken were going to shape the share prices of many listed companies. Ministers in government were expecting a tough line, and the press was looking for a difficult headline. Everyone was expecting a lot of heat, a lot of noise afterwards. The boardroom was unremarkable. Formica chairs behind desks that had seen better days, water, no coffee or tea, and nameplates and badges for people who actually knew each other over the last year, so completely redundant. The air was still, you could hardly hear anyone breathe. It was a lot of tension. She started her presentation with an air of confidence, not rushed. She was very deliberate with certain pauses and certain words. She was wearing a blue suit with a flash of red. She didn't want to attract attention from some of the old school gentlemen who were sometimes inappropriate. And that's a genuine point. She described the importance of the decisions, the context we were in, and also set out some scenarios as to what might happen to the industry depending on the decisions. She summarized hundreds of pages of documents as though they were a novel you'd read on a Sunday afternoon. And then the questions came. Some were very detailed. Some were more about the optics of the decisions and the organization. Others on the board members' pet topics. It's as though you could predict them before they even entered the room. It was getting louder and louder and noisier as people were getting closer to making a decision. She looked each of them in the eye with a certain intensity. She answered the questions directly, quite differently from a typical politician, and she stopped when she'd said enough. She was impressive after and especially after weeks and weeks of often sleepless nights, given the tension involved. She talked about the sector and the ecosystem and what it would deliver for customers, the end customers, in the next 5 years, one moment. And then she dived into the detail of the regulatory mechanism that was involved. It was an absolute masterclass. She was an impressive individual. She was well rehearsed, and she realized that actually when they got to the decisions and they made the decisions, they were very nervous. And actually she realized that actually there was no noise at all because she'd warmed up the stakeholders for months and months. And actually they congratulated her on her clarity of presentation, clarity of thought, and actually poise. So for all the noise, all the stress of the board meeting, the actual impact was one of acceptance and credibility. Now, this person was the Chief Regulation Officer and the transformation leader of a transformation I led over a period of 2 years. She wasn't the CEO, but she was the most transformational leader in her room. So that's one quick story of somebody which characterizes some of the, I think, characteristics of very successful transformational leaders. And I wanted to share a screen now with to give you a flavor of, I can do this. Can you see that? Can you see the slideshow? Yeah? Somebody say yes. Adelina?
Yes, all good.
Yep. I think there are 6 capabilities that are critical and I've hopefully in that short story articulated a few of them. Curiosity in the people and the context they're in, creativity in coming up with new solutions and new ideas, that new sources of growth, clarity about what they stand for and how they communicate, so there's no room for ambiguity, courage to take on the difficult people, the difficult moments and overcome the obstacles, coherence of words to actions, resources to priority and vision to strategy, and care for the people involved, given the effort involved, and care for themselves. Each of those 6 you might think are utterly unremarkable. Doing each of the 6 consistently over a number of years is incredibly hard. I will share with you a test afterwards, which you can do, which I've developed, which you can score yourself I would encourage you to be honest, to see how transformational you are yourself. So those are some of the 6 characteristics. And the hard bit is actually in showing those characteristics and transformations, you sort of have to master difficult paradoxes. The empowering obsessive, empowering people to give their best whilst being obsessive with quality and the bar that you set. Being dynamic and driving people to new things whilst being composed in those moments, as she was in that board meeting. Thinking of the future, the possible futures the organization could shape, but whilst being grounded in the reality and the day-to-day minutiae. Being entrepreneurial, but also being caring and not too mercenary. And being continually curious, whilst not being too curious that you don't build something. This is a canvas for our Transformational Leadership Masterclass, plug, which is coming up in September 8th and 9th, which people can use. So you have to master those paradoxes. You also have to master critical moments, which on the left-hand side you'll see and you'll think, well, that's pretty straightforward, right? I need to tell a story, mobilize a leadership team, activate the organization, make those decisions, handle external stakeholders carefully, sustain the momentum, and also look after yourself. Doing all of those together is incredibly hard. I would say many transformation programs fail because they don't handle the stakeholders or they miss them out, or actually they mobilize the leadership team and forget the organization, or actually after a while they make bad decisions because the top team stop looking after their own health and welfare. And we all know what happens, particularly to politicians. I'm giving the example earlier when they eat too many burgers or don't get enough sleep, as some people do, in terms of the quality of their decision making. So those are some of the critical moments. But let's be clear, transformational leadership roles are brutal. High pressure, high stakes. They expose you. They take over your life if you let them. And they often leave a lot of collateral damage. You know, they take so much of your energy that actually by the time you look up and you finish the role or you have a break, actually there's a lot of collateral damage around you in terms of the people that you love, your own health and welfare. And yes, it is a demanding role, but there are trade-offs that you can consider. There are ways to anticipate some of the challenges and actually work with the people around you, family, relationships, friends, in order to make sure that you are performing like an elite athlete or an elite musician, managing your energy, managing your own personal ecosystem. And let me give you a short story just to sort of illustrate this. This chap, I remember this conversation very, very vividly. He was nearly as tall as me, not quite in the Chris Rangan sense of tall, but he had a wiry frame, greying hair. His eyes were intense and his handshake very firm. His office was full of chairs as though he was holding his board meeting in his own office. Management books on the wall, fine art adorning the wall too, but no photos. I was there to interview him about his approach to leadership, and he was incredibly well rehearsed. I mean, he was telling me all about the transformations he'd led, ready with stock answers. He was proud of his achievements. It was like listening candidly to his autobiography. As we stood up to leave, I asked him what he was planning to do after he retired from his FTSE chair role. I can't say which FTSE chair, but his FTSE chair role. Hardly a difficult question, but the facade that had been on show cracked a little. He was hesitant. I suggested it was an exciting new chapter in his professional and personal life. And for the first moment in about an hour, his eyes looked away from me. His body wasn't quite as taut and as energetic. And he said that he regretted working 7 days a week, 14 to 16-hour days. He said it was going to be hard to repair the damage he'd done. He said, I said to him as I walked into the lift, it's never too late to start. This was on face value a transformational leader on any metric, share price, brand, projects, but it certainly wasn't transformational for his life. Now, I'm not suggesting there's a personal marriage or professional to personal, but actually it's a bit like responsible capitalism for companies. I don't believe you can just deliver profits. You actually have to look after the system around you. And I think the same applies for transformational leaders. And I want to close with this. In this community, I do believe we should be working with, advising, helping, shaping transformational leaders. These are the people who will turn around the fortunes of many companies after the pandemic. These are the people who will lift up the average to the excellent, to the exceptional, to the extraordinary. I've been working now for 25 years. Can you believe it? Yes, you can. And I've reflected recently in my transition of the transformational moments I've led, orchestrated, or been involved in. And there aren't tens and tens of them, and there shouldn't be if you hold a high definition of transformation. It brought up deep emotions, a sense of pride, joy, sacrifice, and pain. But I guess what it does require us all to do, whether we're leading transformational or advising transformational leaders, is to be ambitious in terms of the people we work for, raise our game, bring our best advice, insights, coaching, because these are the people who will shape the fortunes of companies. These are the people we personally want to be associated with. And as a community, and a strategy tools community, that is the bar that I believe we should be working towards. And the program, the masterclass that Chris and I run in September, that the aim of that is to create and develop people like that and the advisors who can help them. And I hope you join me in that endeavor. But I think more generally, I hope you join me in the movement that I'm trying to play a part in, which is creating the transformational leaders to help companies solve their ills, to help companies develop their people, and very importantly, help address some of the big systemic challenges we face as we come out of this pandemic. So I do hope that you'll join me. And with that, I want to close, and I'm happy to take questions in the last, Adelina, 3 minutes. Thank you, that's very kind. But go on, tell me something new, different.
David, maybe I could just ask you one thing. And we do, by the way, have a question period scheduled coming up at 4 o'clock. But when you're an advisor and you're helping these people make the big decisions that matter, what is it that you do and that the strategy tools group can do to help these people?
I think you have to.
What makes the breakthrough?
Yeah, I mean, I think first you have to try and get a really good picture of their psyche, their styles, their habits, their practices. And so I'm beginning to work with somebody who is a very, very fast thinker, and me playing a very relaxed, facilitative coaching style with him will not work, at least initially. So there's something about mirroring, getting permission and a bond and a connection. So they feel, yeah, you're on my agenda, you get my pace, you get me. And then over time, begin to either change tack, ask different questions. So you're not mirroring them just to mirror continually, but you've got to earn your stripes. You've got to earn the respect of them. And then it's about getting a sense in the moment of what their mood is. These are high stress individuals. Sometimes, and starting with a genuine compliment, starting with an observation that can go, oh, thank you, because they don't get many compliments, many of these people, however secure or insecure they are, gets them to a place where they want to listen. And once they want to listen, then you can get into the meat of it, which may be actually, by the way, you've got a blind spot, or actually you're missing something over there.
Thank you.
It's interesting. James asked a question about, there's not going to be a distinction between transformational leadership and leadership as a concept. Well, that's a great point. I do think there are moments of leadership which are more transactional, which may not be transformational for an organization, which Chris and I have had a big debate on this. I believe transactional leadership is transactional, which is in the moment actions that you need to take or enable or empower, where you're not necessarily thinking as deeply of the situation or the person as you need to. You just need to get something done. I think that's subsumed within transformational leadership. But there are people who are operationally running businesses day to day that don't need to embark on a major transformation, at least initially. But I think the mindsets and the practices of transformational leaders, I think, are more generalizable. So I guess I've just contradicted myself a little bit. Yeah.
David, I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for your reflections. I fully agree with all your comments. Secondly, the two tools that you have shown us, are they already available within the suite of strategy tools?
Yes, they are. If you join us for the Transformational Leadership Masterclass. And
Okay.
Chris and our leader will no doubt will say how and where they'll be shared. But they are brand new. We ran the first one, which a couple of you were on, which I'm very grateful. They were brand new, never seen before, and they may even stick. They worked reasonably well. So, so the next one's coming up. As to whether they can be shared within the community, I don't quite know, but
yeah, okay. And then secondly, we spoke just a while ago about returning back to the office. In your opinion, what are the three leadership traits or characteristics that you would mainly focus on for those leaders getting back to the hybrid way of working in the future?
You said three. Okay, so I have to have three. Okay.
Yeah, top three.
Okay, thank you. Very precise. The first one would be remember the strategy as you're thinking about the workplace, the what as well as the how. Too much effort on workplace dynamics at the moment. They're forgetting the the strategic direction, and many organizations have strategy issues. That's one. The second one would be show genuine recognition for people's sacrifices during the pandemic, personal and professional. If you don't do that, firstly, I don't think you're showing your humanity, and secondly, I don't believe you have the right to ask them to try new things out. So recognition. And the third one would be a sense of honesty about the plight of the organization, the challenges you face, and actually honesty about you are trying. Don't know what happened.
Yeah,
let's be honest, let's be honest about the plight of the organization and the fact you're going to be experimenting. So, remember strategy, give some sense of responsibility, and a recognition for people, and be honest too. Those would be the three things I'd call out.
Okay, thank you.